meet the candidates. Do you live in the area?
Yeah, Bradfield.
This is Berowra. You're welcome to come and visit some people or whatever.
I normally play with the guitar here. I don't like entertainment on a Tuesday, so obviously it's not on.
That's you.
Yes, I know.
Here's the stress. I love it through my life.
What do you use?
We start taking our seats.
CJ Hammond, don't go anywhere without Chris Why do you think we're going to
See my live stream.
What it was, it cost us money.
Thank you very much. Will it work?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you know anybody else who's still getting a drink or food, you wouldn't mind just giving them a call.
There, mate.
Otherwise, we're going to close that door. Okay?
A couple of spare seats up the front, don't be shy. Unless you've got rotten fruit, in which case, stay up the back. Come on through.
No, yeah, just like normal.
What's that?
Alright, we're doing something a little bit different tonight, just to get started, have a bit of fun. So this is Dave Samios. Dave Louis, sorry, true. Meet Nick Samios, and so I'm just going to hand over the floor to him for a bit of fun before we get going.
We're just going to play a quick game. I mean, everyone's participation. Everyone would be familiar with the game Simon Says. So if I could get everyone to stand, actually no, I won't get any part of it, but I need everyone's participation. So if I could actually get everyone to stand up, we're going to have a game. These guys are excluded. There is a prize, but that's why they're excluded. Okay. All right. Simon says, put up your left hand. Simon says, put down your left hand. Simon says, scratch your left ear. Simon says, turn around. Simon says, sit down. Simon says, stand up. Simon says, sit down. Simon says, stand up. Simon says, put both hands on your head. I think we already have a winner, actually. This gentleman right here.
I gave up playing these games when I was about 8.
That's great. That's it. That's what we're looking for, actually. I was looking for the person who was the non-conformist and refused to play the game. I hope you like Scotch too.
Well, you didn't have to do that. be sweet of you.
Thank you for your participation. Or non-participation.
Alright. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for coming out tonight. And thanks to those who supported the club, coming having a meal and a drink, because they've allowed us to use this venue for this purpose. So I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. So again, I want to thank the club for being here. I want to obviously thank all the candidates that have been willing and able to come along. We did extend invitation to all 10 of the candidates. Had an apology from Tanya Salatra last week when she was unwell with COVID, although she is out and about at the pre-bowling booths now. And I want to thank Dave Baker over there with Red Belly Black. I didn't know until 4 o'clock this afternoon that he just stepped into this space and was going to be here and recorded. So thanks, David. And I'm going to say thank you to Neil over here, who's actually going to step up here in a few minutes and take over facilitating the question time. And full disclosure, he is my husband. I had to bend his rubber arms. It's not his favourite job, but there was nobody else willing to do it. And he showed us last week, and I know this because I'm married to the man, that he has a very calm and considerate personality and style, and it just kept things going at a nice pace last Thursday, so thanks, Neil, for being here. So just very briefly, my name is Anne. I'm actually just one of a number of volunteers. We're just women out there in the community, mainly women, some men, who are very concerned with everything that's happened over the last 2 years plus, and very concerned about what Australia and all of us are facing in the future. Consider this a really critically important election. And we reached out to Reignite Democracy Australia for the voter education initiatives that they've embarked on, and they've been great. So that is our association with RDA. But we continue to put that voter education out. We're at the pre-polling booths, we're helping on election day, and I'm going to come back at the end of the evening and say, you know, we're very short on volunteers, and we might try and bend all your rubber arms and get you to join us just for the remaining week and a half. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Neil, and he'll briefly explain the format, and we can get on with letting the candidates do the talking, and then you get to do the chance to do the talking for most of the evening, actually. Okay, thanks.
Evening, everyone. How are you going? Thanks for coming along. And so tonight we've got a quick introduction from our wonderful candidates. We have 6 out of the 10 candidates here tonight, which is a pretty amazing turnout. We had a session last week at Cherrybrook, and we had about 50 people at Cherrybrook, so it was a really good session last week. So the format is Q&A. You guys get to stand up and ask a question of the candidates. Just try and keep it, as brief as you can, and we'll also try and get the answers to be as brief as possible as well, so we can get around to everybody and make sure everyone has an opportunity to ask a question. And if you want a second question, then we can get seconds as well. So we'll do the first round first, and then we'll go back to seconds in terms of questions. Yes, I'm going to. We will get there, boss. Hang in there.
Just don't stand on the speaker.
Don't stand under the speaker.
We come out here.
Stand in the middle. There's the first rule for the night. Don't stand under the speakers. So we're learning. Okay, so without any further ado, we'll hand over to the candidates. Quick introduction from each candidate.
David Louie, I live in Mount Cola, married with 5 children. I'm a Christian, unashamedly. People ask me, I love that question, how's life treating you? And I tell people, life treats me terrible, but God treats me good. Every good thing I have is because of God. The reason I'm standing is for a couple of reasons, and like yourselves, there's probably a couple of things you hate. I hate being lied to, I hate being ripped off, I hate having to, I hate it when decisions are made that impact me and I'm not consulted. And I hate it when I have to pay to fix other people's mistakes. I'm now, my children are now 5th generation. My family came out in the gold rush, so my kids are Aussie, you know, oi, 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 oi. Yeah, I love this country, and the Australia that I grew up, the Australia that many of you grew up, is very different to what it is today. And I think it's not for the better. And I don't want to just give the next generation a better future. I actually want to give this generation. You know, we need to actually do things now. And so I'm a bit of an accidental candidate, and I won't go into all the details, but I wasn't seeking to run in this election. But there was a window that opened. I live with the spirit of a giant killer. And so, you know, even though we're in one of the safest Liberal seats, well, you know what? Things have got to change. And so it's for that reason I'm actually standing and want to actually make a change. I've put a flyer on all the chairs so you can actually read a little bit about what we want to do. Feel free to throw questions at us. But I just want to bring truth back into the political sphere. You know, we want to see transparency. I think people have lost trust in the system, and rightly so. And we need to restore that. And we're not going to do it through the existing framework and what we've got. We actually need a new process. We need a new kind of politics, and that's what we're hoping to bring. But, I'll keep it brief, and I'll leave more time for you guys. But that's just a bit about me.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Chris Martnick. I've come from a non-political background. The reason I'm here is because there's a sense of urgency. As you are aware, I'm from the UAP. Towards this movement that are now looking for a change in the way we look at our politics and the way our society is structured. There is now a sense of urgency. I've met so many people that are so motivated from all walks of life, clinical people, ex-nurses who lost their jobs because of the vaccine mandate. People like Tony Nikolic, who's the principal solicitor who's leading the charge against the lockdowns and mandates from AFP solicitors. There are fundamental changes in our society which are taking our democracies away from us. Not just our democracies, but our jobs, our kids' futures, our kids' health. And we're really sort of at the phase right now where people like myself, who were formerly Liberal supporters, I was a supporter of Mr. Lisa, I just got tired of the copy and paste replies and then looked at the big picture of what was happening to us. Coming from a technical background, as I mentioned, my PhD is in biomedical engineering. I spent 35 or actually 38 years in medical and scientific industries, and I've never seen so much corruption, not just in science, but corruption in business and the way that small business was treated in our community, the way our kids would basically have their education stripped from them. 2 years of looking at Zoom screens because governments can't understand risk versus benefit. They would rather do damage the society at the grassroots level than have to take responsibility for making responsible decisions. And this is the problem you get when you get political people that run the system. They can't make decisions. They can't think of your good. And that forces people like me to step up and basically step out of what we normally do and try and sort of change what we see is going wrong. So a lot of people think it's all about Clive Palmer. The UAP is not. It's not about Clive Palmer. It's about the enormous number of talented people that have stepped out of their normal roles and actually been forced out of their normal roles to stand up for our communities, for us and our kids, and actually put the handbrake on for what's happening to us socially. So I really encourage you to think carefully about not just the small picture of the number of businesses and lives that have been affected in Berowra, but also what's happening to our democratic freedoms. In 3 years' time at the next election, you will not recognise this country if we do not apply the handbrake now to what's happening. and hopefully we can go into this a bit later anyway.
Good evening, everyone. Rihanna Goldsmith for Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party. Thank you so much for coming this evening. Just take a moment. I want everyone to really have a moment and realise how lucky we are that we're actually all here together in the same room. It was not long ago that you were restricted to a certain perimeter boundary from your home. It was not long ago that you couldn't see your family or your friends. Don't think it's by coincidence that as the election comes up, we're all of a sudden have our freedoms back. Our freedoms should never have gone anywhere. Now, I was angry and extremely passionate, and I knew in my heart and my stomach what was going on in this world was not okay. I knew that I had a voice, a loud voice. I'm brave, and I'm not afraid to fight for what was right. So I thought to myself, what can I do to make a difference? This is bigger than me, and it's bigger than my family. So I decided to run for candidacy for Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party. Not only have I supported Pauline for a very long time, but I also support a lot of her policies. Mandated vaccines, people losing their jobs, losing their lives, and being locked out of their friends and family was really the tipping point for me. What I want to do is give this community a voice. Now, I've been in this community my whole entire life. I went to Galston High School and I went to Berowra Primary School. Never have I felt represented by my local MP. Has anyone felt represented by their local MP? Has anyone ever felt like you had a say or you could make an impact with the decision that he was passing or signing off on in Parliament? I didn't. So I'd be very surprised if any of you did. This needs to change. This community needs a voice and it needs a representative. You don't need me to represent you. You need to represent you. You need someone that's going to listen to what you want. Hand up if you have Facebook and somewhat can use it. Majority of you. Now, Facebook is a wonderful tool. You can run a poll. This is what I would do. I think it's a very simple and effective way of deciding what community would like us to do. You can run a poll on Facebook. How would you like me to vote in Parliament? What do you want to see change? This is the beauty of a minor party and a freedom party. We do not have to toe the line, and I speak for everyone here, because as much as I think that I will do the best job in this election, you guys have wonderful representatives here, and thankfully you have an array of different candidates that aren't part of the major parties. We do not have to toe the line, okay? We can go against anything we like. We are not restricted to one party, and we are there to support you as a community. So listen to everyone tonight, see who you connect with, come and talk to us individually, ask the questions, we're here for you. But you as a community have a voice. I want to give you a voice, and it's about time that you guys got to make your own decisions, not restricted by some MP that's going to decide what they think is best for you or toe the line of their major party. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Nick Samios. I'm representing the Liberal Democrats, and I'm here to tell you that we've got only 12 days to flatten the majors. There's a dangerous virus that's destroying our democracy. It's career politics, and it's the fact that everybody wants to surrender to these major parties. Now, I'm saying to you, I'm not here campaigning against these wonderful people, because they're here, they've had the courage to be here, and they've had the courtesy, they're paying you a courtesy of being here to face the questions. But I'll tell you who's not here to face the questions, and that's Mr. Julian Lisa. Now, everybody's, oh, but he's such a nice guy. Don't hurt Julian, he's lovely. He gets around to my community. What I hear is he does his job. That's what he's paid to do. He's your elected representative. But he's not here facing the heat. I've got 5 questions for him, and I want to I'll get through just a couple of them. Right? If Julian was here, and I did front him today, but he didn't want to do, I wanted to Aussie Cossack him. I said, can I ask you some questions live stream? He didn't want to do it. But here's one I want to know, Julian. Julian, do you support, and I'll pretend that he's watching, do you support net carbon zero? That's the question I'd like to know. Wouldn't you like to know? Is he in or is he out? Is he going along with the monsters or not? Julian, question 2. Do you support the indoctrination of our kids at schools? Now, we've got a policy. I've got a thing, it's the Freedom Manifesto. There's a bunch of them over there. We've got 10 points. One of our policies is on education. My third question is, Julian, where are you on economics? I mean, you know, how come your government has piled on more debt than the Labor government? And supposedly the Liberals are meant to be good at money. Where are you on that, Julian? Because I don't know and you don't know. You don't know. Have you ever heard him on this? He'll come and, you know, he'll provide a TV for the dual community country club, and he thinks he's done a good job spending the government's money on a TV for the country club. But I don't know if you got this brochure the other day, this A3 thing with all the wonderful things he's done. But meanwhile, the people at that country club, they've got their life savings that are now being, you know, the value of them is going down because of inflation. I'd like to say, and I know that Rihanna is very solid on this too, I'd like to say, Julian, do you support a royal commission into the COVID, the ineptitude and the incompetence and the reckless spending that was the reaction to COVID? I'd like to know where you sit on that, Julian. So, as I say, I'm not campaigning against these people. We've got a very simple basis. As I said, we've got 10 policies to save Australia, and I've got, go and grab them over there. They're all based on two principles. That is less government and more freedom. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Benjamin Caswell. I'm running against the independent in this area. There's a second independent. I've asked everyone, who is he? So if anyone knows, please tell me. He's like, where's Wally? So if you want to vote independent, please, this way here. But if you know anyone else, I'd love to know who Roger is. I don't know. Can I just say, before I introduce myself any further, can I just say that it was recent events that have made me realise to say this. We're all human here. And we have a lot of volunteers around helping us. I know that someone has different views, disagree on them. That's okay, that's part of this democracy. But I ask those out there watching also here that we respect each other during this debate, during this campaign. That yes, the corporates have gone missing or being defaced or other property being damaged. And I don't condone that or support that at all. I think it's great we have people here who are willing to stand up, put their good name out there, and to run for you guys. It takes a lot of hard effort and work there. So I'd like to acknowledge that firstly. So about me now, favourite topic. I've always enjoyed politics. Always been talking to people, okay, mentioned this, I love to talk to you guys. Hey, what's your view on this? Family hated it, so I was always talking, say two things, politics and religion. Oh, there's no going back with me, politics is my favourite topic. But I love to hear what people say. I want to hear what you're thinking. And I see now that we're not being listened to as much. I think our voice has been squashed a bit. And it's time to change that. One of the key things I say on is integrity. And that's something we need back in politics. To me, being a politician is the highest honour because you can serve your community. That is what should be brought back in. Without the integrity, we have nothing. We have a broken education system. It's underfunded. We have a broken health system. Every part you look at now is just falling apart. And without action on any of those items, what's going to happen now? My favourite quotes. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Next best time is now. We need to take action on now these items. Now, there's a question asked me last night and said, what are our chances of getting in? And I say, we have a realistic chance. None of these people here will be standing, and myself included, if we don't believe we had a chance to make a change and a difference for you guys. That needs to happen now. And that's why I'm so passionate to stand. I saw that council election is independent for the same reason, because we need a difference. But I also believe it should be a man of my word. Whatever I say tonight, yesterday, back in the election, tomorrow is the same. You should be able to trust your politicians to know when they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. When they want to have an issue or a topic, they have a way, whether it be yes or a no, that you know. And I believe we need that back in our politics. And if that starts, then we have action for all the broken issues. We need integrity back in our politicians. We need community. These people, we're all part of the community. And I'm pleased to say that you in Berowra actually have some really good candidates who have lived locally, who have worked locally, raised children locally, all around here. So I'm running for that, but as independent, I believe we need to have that, but I'm separate from politicians, from parties. Just for record, I'm not part of any party there. I'm being affiliated, a career politician or staffer, purely independent, because I believe that your voice is the most important and crucial one. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brendan Clark, and I'm the Fusion Party candidate. The Fusion Party was a merger of 5 other independent parties who actually joined together to form the Fusion Party after the Liberals basically introduced legislation last year to deregister small parties because they're basically afraid of the competition. I grew up in a town of Aberdeen as a country boy, and we've been living in Hornsby Heights since 2007, and we came here for looking for the good schools for our children. And so my daughters went to the Hornsby Girls, and the other one, I can't stay thinking up, sorry. My youngest went to Hornsby North Public School. I joined the Science Party basically because I believe that we need a change in politics. And one of the things about science is the fact that we can join the good things about science, which is using the scientific method of continuous improvement, and apply that to politics. One of the things which made me actually join politics in the first place was because I liked science, was that Tony Abbott, one of his first things he did when he gained power in 2013 was to abolish the position of Science Minister. He didn't think science was important, and he cut the CSIRO funding by 50%. Right? Lots of people lost their jobs, and a number of people in the Hornsby and Berowra community had either worked in scientific organisations or their grandchildren basically going to be scientists. So that inspired me to actually take a stand and actually join politics. One of the issues here in Berowra is it's a safe Liberal seat. It's been in Liberal hands since 1969, and a safe seat is a neglected seat. And as you can see right now, Julian Lisa didn't turn up here, and he didn't turn up last week either. He doesn't care, he doesn't want to hold it accountable, and he doesn't want to answer your questions. So all these other people here, and myself included, we've turned up to answer your questions, hoping to actually change that. And what we've got to do is we've got to change that status quo. We've got to hold these politicians accountable to make sure that we're representing you and that they answer all the difficult questions. The other thing we need to do is make sure that donation laws are actually changed. And so one of the things we're trying to introduce is a real-time donation disclosure for any number over $1,000. At the moment, the big politicians at the big ends of the town, anything over $14,500, they've got 18 months to actually tell you who they got those donations from. And by that time, the election's already been won, you're already halfway through a next election campaign. So that's got to stop. So yeah, that's what I'm standing here for, and feel free to ask any questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we've heard from the candidates. Now it's your turn to ask questions. So we're going to have 2 sort of parts to tonight. One will be a bit of a formal Q&A. And then at the end of it, we're going to have a little bit of time where we can just do an informal meet and greet the candidates. So you can either ask questions now, or you can ask your questions later on individually of the candidates. So a couple of opportunities to ask questions. I'll have to be the roving mic man, so I'll have to cruise around and hand out the mic to you guys. And then we've got a mic here for the candidates. All right, so it's over to you guys. It's your night. So who would like to go first?
Hi. Oh. Hi, I'm Glenn Whiteman. My wife works for a public school in Berowra. On the 24th of February of this year, Georgina Harrison, our esteemed Health Education Minister, had information in her hands that there were 8,080 teachers and staff members who were refusing to take the vaccine to keep their jobs. And she withheld this information from the public, and also she lied to the Senate Estimates Committee in front of Mark Latham. So my question to you guys is, if you're in power,
what would you do about this? And what should the current politicians do about the situation?
Okay, so what a great question to kick off the evening, and I'll hand it over to the candidates.
Okay, I'll go first. Was it the part about the lying, or is it the part about the policy?
Both.
Okay, well, I can answer the lying one first. So one of the things that upsets me about politics is the fact that they say Senate estimates committees. They basically will actually lie, or they'll take it on notice, and then they never come back. So that's got to be changed, to the fact that they tell the truth. And it's really, really strange when you see a lot of politicians on their Senate estimates commissions. They talk to their blue in the face, they get in front of one of these commissions, and suddenly they've forgotten everything. They've even forgotten their name. So I think we need to actually change this thing where politicians are actually held accountable for telling the truth. As for the other question, are you concerned about the fact that people were not vaccinating, or the fact that they were being forced to vaccinate? Yeah. Well, I'm associated with the Science Party, the Fusion Party, and I suppose we would leave that up to the decisions of our health ministers to make sure that that is the actually important thing. But listen to on health advice. Right. So as you said, we make sure that we listen to the science, as opposed to some politicians sitting there making a grandiose decision on political expediency.
Who decides what the science is?
Well, science is based on consensus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what science is.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I don't intend to vote about it.
Okay.
Right, so I'll answer that question in two parts as well, about lying and that. Just firstly, Mark opens the upper house of New South Wales, so not the Senate, Senate's the federal one, just the different recognition there. So, as I mentioned earlier, I stand on integrity, and I think part of bringing the federal ICAC will actually, hopefully, bring some honesty back into it. When you have a Premier who says, I can't recall, I'm worried for her, or former Premier, so then she's got dementia. If she can't recall that much stuff, why is she running the state? And so, I believe that firstly integrity will help part of that, because again, if we don't have procedures in place at the core of our system, then how can the rest of our system actually function, or if we have information that we know that has been hidden, or what it may be, to make an informed decision on that. So first part of integrity, federal ICAC, agree with the donation laws, by the way, to see who's pulling the strings, because we don't know if your MP is voting a certain way because of information. Just as an aside, guys, there is a website called theyvoteforyou.org. Highly recommend you go see that, because you can see how they actually vote for you on what topics. If they rebel, if they vote 100% of the time with other people in the party, you'd be surprised who votes for who. I won't say more about that one. In regards to the second part, in that one there, what concerns me, for example, because I work in before and after school care and I've been in education for a while, is hearing last week when Victoria says all those teachers there haven't had the third jab will lose their jobs. To me, that doesn't sit right, because for my industry, we're trying to look after the kids. Our first care is for the kids there. If we're losing the job because someone won't accept that, but you're the best teacher, I don't think that's right. I think you should have the option there. I mean, we're now at a stage of the last years where most people had been double jabbed, fully vaccinated report there. I think we're now at a stage where we're living with this, and we have to say, right, we don't need to keep going this path. I know people, I've got friends, people who've had 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the different amount of jabs, and that's their choice. I believe there should be a choice there, but also believe that should be forced there, because otherwise we'll lose quality people from schools, from whether it be from hospitals. We want to encourage the best to work from there.
Well, policy one of our Freedom Manifesto here is freedom from COVID alarmism. We are totally opposed to mandates. We're totally opposed to lockdowns. The good thing is, well, was Julian pro-lockdown? We don't know. We don't know. Who knows? Was he pro-vaccine mandate? I don't know. So we don't know that. But the other thing is, I don't want to steal from Chris's thunder, because he's the guy that's right across all of the science on COVID. We're totally anti mandates, if you want to get, we say that vaccines should be available and they should be voluntary. The other thing is, something that Pauline Hanson's been really effective at, but it is our policy too, but we share this policy, so I'm not stealing your policy, it is in our book, and that is we want a Royal Commission because they have to be brought to account. So there's a couple of things. Firstly, Royal Commission, because they must be brought to account. You know, if like we all work for a living, right? And if we stuff up to the magnitude these people have stuffed up, you know, we'd be on the dole by now. Now the other thing is that we have, I think policy 4 in our Freedom Manifesto is recall elections. So we believe that by petition, like they do in California, for example, in America, you can have a petition, and if enough people sign the petition, then you can recall them and make them face the music. Imagine if they had recall elections in Victoria. Do you reckon there'd be enough people to get Dan Andrews up in front of the people? You know, I reckon there would be. And if he knew that, do you reckon he would have turned, you know, rubber bullets on protesters? I don't think so. I know I've got more time, but I'm going to hand it.
Not to repeat what Nick said, but we are extremely passionate at One Nation pushing this Royal Commission. We as the people deserve answers. We don't have answers, we have false results. People went to hospital with a broken arm and got jotted down as a recovered COVID patient because they had COVID before even getting to the hospital for a broken arm. I mean, this stuff just doesn't make sense. How ridiculous. In today's day and age, for government to get away with this is beyond ridiculous. So we are absolutely fighting for transparency. We are fighting for the Royal Commission to find out exactly what went on and to find out the correct data, because the data that you and I are hearing is not the correct data. Someone said last night, how come Australia have the highest survival rates? You know why? Because the figures aren't right. So until we get the figures right, that's what we're fighting for. Secondly, we are extremely anti-mandate. Vaccines can be available fine, but it's up to you if you have them or not. It's also absolutely absurd and ridiculous that we're even still talking about vaccines. How ridiculous. You're injecting something into your body. You're allowing uneducated opinions to tell you what to inject into your body. So we are absolutely outraged by it. We will not tolerate it, and we are absolutely fighting for freedom for you to decide what you would like to put into your body. Thank you.
I'll just be quick. I'd like to see every politician, the problem that we have is politicians are a protected species, and that needs to change. They have one standard for them and they have one standard for us. Anybody who lies and deliberately misleads and withholds information, I'd like to see them prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Jail time. You know, I don't want to see just a slap on the wrist and a little fine or a demotion. You know, if we get caught, sorry, not if we get caught, if we do anything in our jobs, in our professional roles, again, of the magnitude of what they do, you know, we're barred from the industry. We face jail time, hefty fines. Politicians get off light. That needs to change. So I'd like to see them treated like ordinary citizens, not treated as protected species. I'd like to see all the teachers, everyone that's been forced out of a job, reinstate. How we do that, you know, we have to work with, you know, within the party, you know, with the other members and so forth. But that's what I'd be working towards, full accountability.
Thank you for that question. It's very close to my heart. My sister is a school teacher, and what's happened to school teachers is why it's happened. I have never seen a bigger corruption of science that's driven this policy. It is utterly corrupt. My sister sent me an SMS from a principal of a school in her area that said, any parents wishing to teach, they can do a crash course in teaching to make up the numbers. This is what we're down to. We had Tanya Davies basically saying that 9,000 casuals have walked off because of the jab, and that's only casuals. And now they're bringing in teachers from overseas to make up the numbers. The whole system is collapsing, and why? Because the education department was made to do something, to carry out a policy where the government could not understand the risk to children and teachers was so low that it didn't mean firing them. What happened was that when you've got, it's not just the teachers, it's also the children. We are the first generation in recent modern history to make children carry the risk to protect adults. So they say, normally we as adults protect our children, but when you force vaccinate not just the population, but also the children as well, we've never had children take on risk to protect adults. It's around the wrong way. And now with teachers basically being blackmailed out of a job because of bad science, because the government can't understand risk. It can't understand that the risk of COVID and death to the greater part of the population is so low that it isn't worth blanket vaccinating the entire population. This is not science. What is really important is that people understand what should happen and as Craig Kelly has put it, everybody who's lost their job because of the vaccine mandate should get it back. That's and our policy is freedom of choice, freedom to choose. There is a small part of the population that may benefit from the vaccine, but the overwhelming size of the population wouldn't. And because of that, we're made to carry this burden and to destroy our society with lockdowns and mandates. The question is it really the disease or is it something else that's tied to it? Why is it so important to them to do this to us?
Okie dokie. That was a great first question. Thank you for that. That's stood up the evening, so that's really good. Second question.
No, I have to hang on to something. Leg problems. Excuse me. My name is Ziggy. I'm a professional entertainer, computer consultant, retired commercial pilot for what it's worth. Just to let you know my background, I'll tell you before I ask the question, is that I know something about the great COVID vaccination scam because I've spent the last 2 years researching it. And I've got that much information on it's beyond belief. And my question is, how many of you candidates will call out the great vaccination scam simply because those COVID vaccines aren't vaccines at all? They're experimental gene therapies. They've not been patented as vaccines. They don't operate as vaccines. They don't immunise. They don't inoculate. The whole thing, it's like the climate change. You know, they call it carbon instead of carbon dioxide. They're telling us that diamonds come flying out of chimneys and pollute the air and change the climate. Yeah, there's a big difference between carbon and carbon dioxide, and these bastards who are in power running the climate change scam are telling us that when they call carbon dioxide carbon, they might as well call water oxygen. It's the same principle. But anyway, how many of you will call out the great vaccination scam without and try and stop these mongrels who are scamming us from even referring to those poisons as vaccines? Because up to now, as of April 17, 826 people have died from the vaccines, and that's underreported. And 120,000 people have got permanent debilitating ailments from those poisons, and yet they're still flogging it on TV. Get the vaccines. How many have got the guts to call them out?
Ziggy, that's a wonderful question, and I completely agree. You know, this COVID has become a cult. That's what it is, and what you described is very accurate. The science is so corrupt. You know, I've seen so many vaccine injuries that simply cannot get airtime. I have 7 engineers that work for me in my department. One of them is 24 years old. He never would be at risk from COVID. He now has high range myocarditis. He has easily had 10 to 20 years taken off his life, and he is a zero risk person. What is happening now is that the science is so corrupt, and the people who are the luminaries, and there are people like Luc Montagnier, Peter McCulloch, Mark MacDonald, these people are absolute medical luminaries. And the level of censorship and the level of suppression of information is something that I have never seen in my entire scientific career. Up until now, I had a lot of faith in science and in the medical profession as a general rule. But that's been shattered, because what's happened now is that we've lost that sense of trust, because for the first time in human history, they've linked arms to make sure that we can't find things out, that we can't debate, that we can't talk, and everybody that's injured disappears. We have a member of the Berowra community, she was a very big supporter of Mr. Lisa. She had her aged in-laws were in a retirement home. They had the vaccine. Again, it's a risk-benefit equation. They decided to take the vaccine. They were in very good health. They had physicals. One in-law died at 3 days, and the second one died at 4. Yeah. And these things never make the papers. It never. When you hear the story in the papers, it's okay. Everything's going well. It's not going well. The comorbidities that are happening. The vaccine itself is a genetic therapy. It is not a vaccine. The Webster Dictionary redefined the word vaccine to include mRNA therapy about a year ago. Before that, it was actually a pathogen or portions of a pathogen. So what's happened now is that we have this enormous pressure to redefine science, to redefine the way we look for information. The level of control of information is really quite extraordinary. I've never seen anything like this in my life, in my career. And I have to agree with you, Ziggy, that what is happening now is simply unbelievable. And I would certainly encourage people to look beyond the press releases and the papers, because the situation now is very dire, and it's not just about the vaccines, it's about the entire way the structure of debate is changing in this country.
I don't have anything to add to that. Totally agree.
Ziggy, definitely agree. I think the problem isn't also just the science. The problem is how they've delivered the information and how they've hidden information from us, and that needs to be looked into as well, because I'm sure if we delved into the correct science of it, the science wouldn't go in their favour. And that's why we need to make sure the government has some kind of transparency in delivering us the correct information, not coercing us and not delivering information that is, a little bit one-sided. But absolutely agree.
I'll just very quickly say, I think that the Royal Commission certainly gets into uncovering the facts, so I won't go over that. Secondly, I would say that there's a freedom of speech issue here. One of the problems that we saw through the pandemic, it was incredible how much speech could be suppressed. I mean, if you wanted to mention ivermectin or HCQ, I'm not saying I necessarily support those things, but if you want to air them, I mean, this is why we need free speech, and we need to be able to air ideas. And if I come up with something, you can shoot me down, But we have the airing of ideas was suppressed, and our policy 9, our Freedom Manifesto, is the reinforcement of free speech via constitutional mechanism. The other thing I would say is that we believe in small government, and one of the things about small government is for us to get out of these international institutions that are effectively, and I don't like to say world government because then I sound like a bit of a crackpot, but the reality is that all of these, the United Nations and all these other associations that we belong to, that's why we're complying with all this rubbish, right? Because we've agreed to things that you and I didn't agree to, but these career politicians shake hands with other career politicians at their lovely conferences they go to and put on their fruity t-shirts, and that's what we're bound by. So.
I shouldn't say that. I think Nick and Rihanna raised a good point about the Royal Commission. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to find answers out, and it's been integrity there, because if we don't know what's behind the background, I question some of the decisions that were made. When AFL players could fly to Queensland, and I couldn't go see my relatives, because there's a risk there, I go, hang on, where is the decision making happening? So I agree that there needs to be a commission, definitely look into how it's been handled, why the decisions not made are contradictory, and to move forward from that. Because if we don't know the answer, then I go, well, how do we know this work's been hidden? So I agree that the commission will be done, but I echo these guys here. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm all about looking after the science of this, and I believe it's been a politicised issue, but I'd also support a look into on how this thing was handled, and there was a lot of contradiction between the Health Minister and Dr. Chen. So there was obviously some politics that went in that was going over health advice, and so I'd like to get a Royal Commission to that as well, just to make sure that we are getting the proper science and the proper handout to everyone. But also we want to make sure that the politicians are not making these decisions by themselves, but they're actually relying on the actual best science of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ziggy.
Thank you, Ziggy, for that question. Next question.
Hi panel, my name's Michael, I'm from Berowra Heights, long-term resident of the Berowra electorate. I just want to ask a question about, I guess a climate change related question. So the government's adopted the policy of zero carbon emissions by 2050, which the other parties have also supported. It seems to me that that's likely to have a lot of negative impacts on the community in Australia. Just want to ask where you guys stand on that, what your thoughts are on that, and just get your views. Thank you.
Yeah, so we don't, Fusion Party, Science Party, we think that the net zero by 2050 just doesn't go far enough. Hold on. Okay, so there's a lot of concern about the community that thinks that we start going to net zero technologies, that we're somehow going to ruin our economy, and I argue the opposite, right? So basically, we, as took the federal election in 2019, 800% renewable energy investment in Australia, to get 800%. People thought we were crazy, but the Greens now adopted our policy. They only got 700%, but that's okay, right? And people think, oh, that's a bit crazy. How can you possibly do that? Well, just think about the amount of renewable energy we've got today. You times it by 8. Okay. So what's that allow you to do? It allows us to be a net exporter of green energy overseas. And before everyone thinks I'm crazy here, they're already doing it. Okay. So the government's already signed a contract to build a 4,000 kilometre undersea submarine cable to export clean energy from Darwin to Singapore. Okay? It's going to create the jobs, it's going to create more jobs than mining, right? And it's going to also allow to much more efficient power in the Northern Territory as well. So they're going to put battery-backed storage plus a large-scale solar. And there's a lot of these projects which are popping up all around Australia. So just think, every wind turbine, every solar battery, every battery backup that needs to be built in Australia, it's going to create clean, new jobs. Coal mines only create good investment and new jobs when the mine is actually being constructed. When it's actually running, it's very, very few jobs to keep that operational. So if you want new jobs, you need to be building infrastructure. And one of the things that's the problem with renewable energy right now, one of the arguments is that we can't do it, is because our electricity grid is not suitable for feed-in. So if you can, we have to now restructure our grid to make sure that it allows feed-in tariffs. That means huge amounts of construction that needs to be done. That means a lot more reliable existing network, but it also means a lot more jobs by creating that network, and it's a lot more affordable electricity over time. Thank you.
So my position on that one in regards to that, I see two different sides here. See, the Greens go over here, the Liberals over here. My concern, if we're making a transition there's nothing in the middle. A lot of people seem to think it's just all solar and wind, and when close coal power stations, we've got 6 in Australia to be closed shortly. What I'm advocating for is nuclear energy in between, because for a base load, if we don't have that base load there, just so you guys know, there's an app from Whiteman that looks at the power that each state consumes every day. I recommend you look it up. At the moment, in New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria, 70% of that comes from coal power plants. Wind, solar come to about 20% at the moment. If we move to that, we're going to go to dark ages. I believe in looking for better things, renewables, whether it be more efficient, so it'd be looking at dissolvable plastic bags, which is an Australian startup created 2 months ago. And yet we're still paying 15 cents for a bag of poles or bullets. And it's using more plastic. I believe the movement we can move across, but I believe it's done sensibly. When I ran for council, I said the same thing. I had a 2030 target net zero for Hornsby Council. I said, yes, I'm happy to do that, but if it's sustainable. There's no point going totally to a target. I don't mind there is a target, but I agree that there has to be some industry there. Whether it be moving from coal to uranium, say, great, we might move across to uranium. We help support others there. But it has to be done in a sustainable way that doesn't just collapse our economy. So that's where I stand on the environment. Yes, environment is important. Whether or not we blame climate change, we need to do something about environment. How far we go, I'd like to see more research on it as well. I don't believe net zero is achievable at the moment, but I don't believe we should just go and ditch everything we have. We need to have transition across. That investment, whether it be through startups, find more efficient ways, I think will help us move forward. Thank you.
Firstly, I'd like to congratulate the Fusion Party who has the courage to face, which is a room that isn't necessarily entirely friendly. So good on him for being here. And I also think that you can articulate the Greens' positions a lot better than they can. So thankfully there's not too many of you from that point of view. Now, can I just have by show of hands, if I say tally-ho and rolling, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah? Okay. There's not a cigarette paper that separates the Greens, Labor and the Liberal. Well, I don't think it's over here and over here. They're all the same. Now, I've got a little party trick. I reckon before you can count to 5, I can make you boo. Okay, you ready? Matt Keane. Boo! Yeah. So we say no to net zero 2050, and I don't want to even have a conversation with you until you're prepared to lift the ban on nuclear energy, which is the cleanest form. And unless you're willing to put that on the table, then you've got some other agenda and you're not serious.
One Nation really echoes basically what Nick said. We're very invested into investigating and exploring nuclear energy. We do not support net zero, and we absolutely hands down oppose these multi-billion-dollar national agreements we have with overseas foreign investors for the solar and for the wind farms. Hands down.
You know, one of the things about so-called renewables, which are actually not renewables, I think I coined the term non-renewable renewables. The situation we're in is that people that talk about this sort of thing just don't know the numbers. Let me give you some numbers that will actually put this in context for you. Our baseload power supply, and they say solar is 20% of our power supply. Not today, not at this time of night. What we have right now is 27 gigawatts of generation is our baseload. For basically in this country, it's spread out over 16 coal-fired power stations. That is what's running this country when there's no wind and no sun. That's our baseload. And just to give you an idea of scale, Cooper Creek, 100 square kilometres of land sacrificed to solar panels is delivering about 0.4 of a gigawatt. That's the wind contribution to that scheme. And that undersea cable is supposed to be solar powered. You've got to be kidding. Now let's look at this. Let's look at this logically. The estimates from Professor Stephen Wilson, Energy Futures, University of Queensland, basically submitted the government a report. The baseload demand for 2050 will be 70 gigawatts. 70, 2.5 times what we have right now. You can run an economy one of two ways. You can sit there and basically destroy your economy and starve yourself of energy, kill your manufacturing, and you can do that and call it net zero. But if you really want to power this country into the future, I happen to attend the nuclear engineering panels meetings, Engineers Australia. So I know a little bit about this technology. The technology that is going to take this country forward your small modular reactors. We're talking about modular reactors that are the size that would fit on the back of a semi-trailer. An example of those is the NuScale technologies. That was our case study at the Nuclear Engineering Panel meeting in 2021, which went through all these energy figures. We went through and did an analysis of what it would take to deploy nuclear energy into Australia. And guess what? And each of those NuScale reactors is about 77 megawatts each. You could bank 12 of them to deliver, to replace an entire coal-fired power station into the same 1 square kilometre area of a normal coal-fired power station. It would be a drop-in replacement for a coal-fired power station. And it refuels every 2 years, and we have the uranium to basically provide us with cheap, extensive, virtually endless energy without having to destroy areas of landmass. And the thing that really worries me, Patrick Moore, the co-founder of Greenpeace, said that exploiting third world countries, destroying their environments by mining and extracting poisonous toxic metals like lithium, which is one of the most neurotoxic substances on the planet. It's used in tiny amounts as a psychotic treatment. We are not here in the business of destroying other people's environments so we can live our luxurious fantasies about solar panels and wind. What will actually happen, what will drive this country in the future? If you really want zero emissions, guess what? Small modular nuclear is zero emissions. So what we need to do is to really do what UQ Energy Futures Department is actually suggesting is to immediately launch on a feasibility and a program to introduce small modular reactors as drop-in replacements for our coal-fired power plants. There's nothing wrong with being clean, nothing. It's good not to destroy your environment and pump pollutants into the air. That's okay, we're not arguing about that. But what we do argue about is that we don't want our society starved of energy, and we don't want solutions that can't even keep up with what the energy needs of today. 70 gigawatts, 2050, remember those numbers. And then ask yourself where you're going to get that kind of energy supply to drive our country forward. Exporting energy, we don't even have enough for ourselves. Yeah. So let me encourage you to look at very closely. The United Australia Party is very, very attuned with what's happening in current technologies, and one of the benefits of having the population, the membership that we have is with a lot of different people who are genuine experts in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. You know, if I get elected, you know who your chief energy and chief science officer is going to be. I'll say two things, and this will answer part of your question earlier too, Ziggy. The science is never settled, and the science is corrupted. The problem that we have is government is not listening to people, and it's beholden to corporate interests, large corporates, and it's beholden to foreign interests, which clearly are not our own. And that's the big problem. And I don't have a lot to say. I certainly can't speak at the level of specificity and the technical knowledge that Chris speaks at. But what we want to do is we want to give a voice back to the people. We want to, I'm convinced that the smartest people are not in Canberra. And every time there's a policy decision that's made, it's a knee-jerk reaction, it's poorly formed, it's poorly implemented, and it never solves the problems. And so I don't buy into the whole climate agenda. There's always a narrative and there's always an agenda. And I lost my train of thought. I work in funds management. Whenever an investment proposition is put forward, there's always models behind it. And we've seen with climate alarmism, their models have all been wrong, all their forecasts have been wrong. We were told that, Warragamba Dam would never fill, and even if it did rain, it wouldn't be enough to fill it. Well, guess what? Wrong. We were told the ocean was going to rise 100 feet, the polar caps were going to melt. I don't even buy into the narrative. And so, when you ask the question, what's my view, what's my position on it, it's like, let's not start the conversation there. Let's actually look at the real science. let's look and see what the real solutions are for energy, rather than chasing some fallacy, some futile, we're never going to get there, according to what they want. And the way that they want us to get there is by destroying industry, destroying jobs, decimating third world countries. So again, we can live in our own little fantasies. I don't buy it. My personal position is, if I hear a lie, you've got to call it out. And so even just to address it and to speak to it, I think is a waste of time. I don't think we shouldn't have robust discussion. But when someone puts forward an agenda and I just go, you know what, doesn't pass the smell test, doesn't pass the pub test, let's go back to the facts.
Okay. The lady up the front, first lady of the evening, pressure's on. This better be a good question.
I hope so. So changing gears a little bit, and it's a financial management question. And it's related to the bail-in laws that I believe were passed in 2017, which gave enhanced powers of crisis resolution powers to the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority. So my question is, firstly, is it true that these powers include mechanisms by which banks can actually confiscate cash savings from private citizens' bank accounts? And if that is the case, what policy changes could any of you offer to protect us from something like this being implemented?
What a very interesting question. So who'd like to go first?
I'll do my best, but I think I can only answer the first half. The World Economic Forum has said, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. They're not even hiding it from us. They're actually telling us what's going to happen. I work in financial services in the funds management industry, and having seen what happened in the GFC, we saw the behaviour of, we saw how global investment banks behave, and they're bloodthirsty, they're brutal, and there was a phrase that was coined, which was the privatisation of losses. Sorry, the privatisation of wealth and the socialisation of losses, and it's what we're seeing. I don't know if those laws have been passed, but it is insidious, and we need to stop it. How we do that, I'm not sure, but we need to wake people up to the fact that this is not something that's out there, and it might not reach our shores. It's here, it's been contemplated, and I understand they're actually doing things even when it's not legislated as well. But we need to speak up against it, and that's what we'll do.
I'm not familiar with the confiscation concept that you mentioned, but I am familiar with it. There's something that's very closely related, and it worries me enormously, and that is the digital identity and privacy information. We've already seen that confiscation is almost the same as having your assets frozen. And what's happened in Canada right now, I'm sure you all know what's happened in Canada. There have been protests against the government, and they're rightful protests and legitimate protests. And the government is now using digital identity to basically track down those who are not just protesters, but those who supported the protesters and actually donated money, and they froze their bank accounts. I'm extremely worried that the system is now building, and I hope that tonight someone asks the question about digital privacy and the facial recognition biometric database they're working on, which I've got some information on. But what is happening now is that they are building the infrastructure where they can control your finances. They can control them for emergency reasons, as you pointed out. This has already happened in other countries where they've frozen assets. They've basically done this in a completely undemocratic and arbitrary way. So I think that it's just a matter of time before more and more of these so-called emergency measures are actually put into place. Under the so-called emergency measures, they've been using this now for a number of years, especially in the not just this COVID infrastructure that they've been building, but also in the parallel information systems that they're building along with this, which is really quite extraordinary when you think that they are doing this without legislation. They're doing it without basically any government oversight. The Senate Review Committee rejected basically biometric and facial recognition databases years ago, and the tender is now closed for something in my view is entirely illegal. So I would be worried. So to answer your question, this would not surprise me in the least, that the confiscation would be a tool that they would actually use in certain active measures.
We already have bills passed here in Australia where the government can access your emails. I mean, these are real privacy laws that have been passed through Parliament. Did you know that was getting passed through Parliament? Did they ask you prior to it getting passed? Did they ask you what you wanted? Did anyone ask you how you wanted them to vote on it? Absolutely not, and this is exactly my point. No one got a say. I certainly didn't want to give the government access to my emails or to my search history. Look, that's fine if you think I'm a criminal and you're coming to investigate me, whole other story. But the rest of us, we're entitled to our privacy, and we are having that ripped away day by day. So will we do something about it? Absolutely. We will stand up and we will fight it all the way. We will stand up in Parliament, we will vote no, hands down to all of the above. But we really need to start to act. People need to talk about it, people need to voice their opinions, and us as a general public, we need to talk to whoever's in power, be it your MP, local council, local government, and say, we're not happy with this. This is something that's ongoing. Do you think COVID passports was a test run? Because it was. This is the sort of thing we need to wake up to. Our personal information is our personal information, and digitalisation can be a wonderful thing. Technology can be a wonderful thing. But there's a very, very fine line in how much information remains ours and how much information can be passed on to the government. So think about it, and honestly, choose someone that's going to be a voice and that's going to fight to maintain your privacy and your freedoms. Thank you.
With respect to the bail-in laws, I'm not entirely clear on them because I don't have more than $250,000 in the bank. Now, I would need to, if you Google bail-in Pauline Hanson, she had something to do, I don't know whether she capped it at 250,000 or whether or not she got rid of it altogether. But the idea was that if a bank gets into trouble and you've got more than $250,000, it goes. So it's not for lower levels, certainly it's not for my humble savings account. But you mentioned that you said 2017, and that was under the Liberal government. But back in 2000, with the GFC, the Labor Party completely overreacted to it. And one of the things that they did was, your savings are essentially unsecured liabilities of the bank. And Wayne Swan brought in a rule that probably nobody here is aware of, because I'm in bank and finance, I'm aware of it. But he basically pushed your savings down what they call the list of priorities, so that other unsecured lenders to the banks could suddenly, and because, well, even now as I'm telling you, it's complicated, isn't it? And because it's complicated, they got it through without so much as a whimper. We have a policy, it happens to be sort of tucked in under our small business policy in our Freedom Manifesto. We believe banks should be allowed to fail. I think one of the biggest mistakes in the GFC was banks have got to be able to fail. If they lend recklessly, they should be allowed to fail, and we shouldn't have bail-in. The whole idea of bail-in is that we protect the banks. We've effectively socialised the banking system, and the reason for that was that in the GFC, the government basically bailed out the banks, right? They bailed them out with their guarantees. As I say, if they were lending recklessly, they should have failed. And so the we've socialised the banking system, and then the government wants quid pro quo, and so then that's why our financial system in Australia there's too much control.
Thank you for the information. I actually had no idea about that law, so that's something new to me. It relates to the injury card as well, which concerns me. There's one about the injury card here. Wow, I'm surprised about that one. So basically what the government's bringing in a system for paying pensions, etc. on that they can choose how you spend that money. You can access it. That concerns me. I'm part of several groups where the generation's a bit older. They still use cash. My concern is that then they can't spend it on what they want to. So that links into that bill, and I'm concerned that there's a bit of control there. I would have to look into that law a bit more, find out. I believe that to some regards, there need to be some restrictions on that. For example, when you see money laundering through Crown Casino, etc., I think there's an intention for a bill like that if the terms of reference are towards that, but not generic as you're saying there. I don't believe that, for example, whether or not you disagree with the truckers in Canada, their accounts being frozen. That, I believe, is their money, and they can choose what they spend on it, as long as it's not legal activities, and that's fine. Having that frozen, if you decide that, that's not on. Because one thing that concerns me, I don't know if you guys realise, is the government can actually change your internet search history. I kid you not. I know about this last year. Actually, the bill gone through. So they can change it, say you're looking up porn or something, or looking up, whatever it may be. I'm being serious here. And they can take you to court because they change your history. That will then link into that bill saying you can lose money from that. So I would happy to do more research in that, but I would say restriction of service, having these other bills similar to it concerns me, because then if your search history can be changed by Peter Dutton, then they can freeze your assets saying it's not on. So I don't support the principle unless it's restricted. I'll have to do more research, and I have had a debate on how we go forward that bill. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I know a little bit about the bail-in law and its fact, but just like you said, $250,000 if you got over there. They can't confiscate under 200, but anything over $250,000 they can take to bail in banks. But I think that's wrong. United States, I think they did a combination of two of those things. One, they let the banks fail, but when they bailed out the banks, the government took ownership of the bank. So in other words, the company can't profit from that bail-in, which is the most important thing, right? As with the Indu card that you mentioned, was the cashless welfare card. That literally was a trial which was put on in remote communities for people who were potentially having issues with drug and alcohol. So the idea, the Liberals, they want to punish anyone that's on welfare. So first it was a trial supported by pretty much all politicians. It failed miserably. It cost $10,000 per user to stick it on. It created higher incidence of domestic violence and abuse. And so basically pretty much most of the politicians didn't want to support it anymore on an ongoing basis. Of course, Liberals are now doubling down on that, and now they're threatening to put pensioners on that Indu card as well. So one of the things it does, and this is where it goes into the real restrictions, you only get 20% of that money goes into cash, the other 80% goes on the card, and you get a private corporation which is controlling your access to the money. Not a government, but a private organisation. And it's leaving people homeless because if you go on the Indu card and that private corporation doesn't control your payments correctly, what's happening is it's got such a bad stain is that if people find out you're on an Indu card, they will no longer rent a house to you, right? And so this is creating this big problem. Now, the government was asked this year, are you going to push it out to pensioners? And at first they said no, but it's actually written into legislation right now that they're going to do it. And there already are pensioners who are already on this card right now. Anne Rushton also said all welfare is applicable to the legislation. So if the Liberals get in again, they may actually push pensioners onto this card. And therefore, if you want to get children, your grandchildren presents, you'll have to ask a private corporation permission to actually purchase those presents. Right? This is the sort of really scary type money restrictions that that party, the Liberal Party of the Party of Freedom, is supposed to be putting on you. And that's very, very scary, because if they start there, how much extra they're going to go. Thank
you. There's a question over here for this lady.
I'd like to make a statement. So I am one of those people who is not vaccinated because as a baby or a very young child I had whooping cough, and that had its ramifications all through my life. So I do not want to take an experimental vaccination and put it in my body. And I was at a workshop, and one of the ladies had a very close friend in England, and he was wondering whether he could take something to harmonise the effects of the vaccine, because he had to cross countries. And she, who was a homeopath, said, look, I can't give you anything. But he went to a local person in England, and then he did the trip, and 4 days later he was dead. And she actually didn't know, because she said they phoned twice a week or so. So this happened, I think, last year, maybe in the middle of the year. So that's a situation which I was in and heard the friend talking about what happened. So because I don't use the vaccination, my dentist, they first of all sent me a note to say that your examination is due, and then I got another note from the head office to say you can only attend if you're vaccinated. So that was the first one that happened. Then I was supervising exams for special needs students at Macquarie Uni, and they sent me the form to fill in for doing the exams for last November, December. And first of all it said, have you been vaccinated? And I said no. And the next section started with, do you intend to be vaccinated? And I said no. And so that was the end of the supervisions at the Macquarie Uni. And I actually am very qualified and understanding of handicapped people. I've been a principal of the school for handicapped people in South Africa for 10 years. I was then in Australia. I taught handicapped adults. I was the manager of the Activity Therapy Centre Berowra. And I just feel that we've come to a point where international arrangements are not serving the human being. I really think we need to rethink and relook at, especially for education and social things and all that sort of thing, the local connections and the local organisations, so that we are never again taken for a ride universally. Okay, now I also was enduring guardian and power of attorney for an elderly colleague whom I'd worked with when I first came to Australia. And all went very well in the Elizabeth Lodge Anglican aged care facility in Rushcutters Bay, until COVID hit. And once COVID hit, the ladies who had been the managers just relinquished their position and went into other positions. We got two men, not to say that it's the men, but these two men were unexperienced, inexperienced, and very biased. And I actually then was talking to the manager of the place, and I said, I need to have access to my friend, especially if she's becoming very frail and ill and near to death. I need to be there. And then they actually said to me, he said, well, no, we can't allow that. And I then went through all the points that I could think of. And he said, well, we'll just put up a big banner which says, no visitors allowed, and you won't be allowed past this banister. So I was continually fighting battles like this, and being prevented from visiting my friend, because sometimes they had lockdowns for 6 weeks. And that is very difficult for the elderly people to be withheld their close relationships and family members. So I was actually thinking, well, when I become in need of that, I will go there. But after this experience of the COVID and how it changed things, I thought, there's no way I'm going in that facility. There's no way. I've got a bit more written. Okay, I'd like to say that there has been so much tampering with the internet. And you have been, I got a link and I knew this link was really good. And I even spoke to a doctor who was in New Zealand and I knew well, and he said this doctor is outstanding. And because he spoke and gave a picture of what he saw happening, they just deregistered him. And so he's not a doctor anymore. And so he has to work possibly under the hat. And this is a top doctor in America. And then, not only that, but this friend of mine who has been a doctor, a GP, then he has been a gynecologist, then he has been a psychiatrist, and he's also done missionary work. And because he got a group of doctors together and they wanted to have a meeting with the health officials, with the government, about how they felt about the experimental nature and the dangers that there are for the human beings, the whole group were put on notice, and he has lost his registration as a psychiatrist. And this is in New Zealand. This is close to home. Why are all these things happening? You know, people are saying, oh, it's just, what's the theory? It's just a made-up theory. It's just a conspiracy theory. This is not. And then I said to my sister, who's a librarian, she actually said to me, when you get these links, always look up and see, find the reference for who has produced that program. And we have done this, absolutely. So you can find out who is absolutely experienced and speaking from a right standpoint, and who is not. So when people think it's a conspiracy theory, it is not. There is much more going on than we think. And the thing is that the television and the radio have been absolutely set up to give us a certain picture. And if you look on the links, you will find local doctors who are experts and who know all the figures and everything, because the figures are being played with a lot, as was said earlier. And then you can actually try and sort out, but it's a very time-consuming thing. I think that's it. That's it.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful statement. I think the lady would like to know why this is happening in Australia, and she would also like to know what you're going to do about it. So I'll hand it over now to the candidates.
Hi. Yeah, so why is it happening? Well, there is a global pandemic, and lots of people did die, and a lot of people got sick. So I believe there's a lot of people who are going together trying to look for a good way to actually solve that issue. Along the way, everything gets lost in translation. You've got people who are anti-vax, you've got people who are pro-vax, and you've got people in the middle who like vaccinations but maybe not like these ones. I think the most important part is that truth gets out and we actually understand what the actual truth of that matter is, right? The vaccines are very controversial in terms of most of the public doesn't like them, all right? It's also done by the politicisation of this. You know, Scott Morrison didn't order vaccines early enough, right? Then because they didn't have enough masks, there was the health advice was flip-flopping between one thing and another. And then there was lockdowns, which were not very, very popular. I believe the lockdowns were in part done to protect people, but I think what happened is in certain things like nursing homes that are already understaffed at the moment, that stopped people from visiting people who are especially vulnerable and things like that. This could always be done much better. We can still protect people's health with vaccinations, but we can also make sure that people are looked after when these pandemics and stuff come. I mean, don't think this pandemic could be a future one that could even be more dangerous next time. But I think what needs to be done is that a national response in Australia needs to be done. It needs to be coordinated at the national level to to make sure that the government can take proper advice and actually take proper action with the best science available. We did see different states all doing their own different thing, and I think we need a coordinated approach with a combination of the states and the federal government together, but also to be looking after the people at the end of the day. Thank you.
I'll approach your question on 2 points. Firstly, from a health point of view, I don't believe that you should be barred from having your health care. I know that, for example, in Queensland last year, people who did not have the jab, their choice, were not allowed in hospital. That I don't believe is not on. I believe whatever your choice is, whether we're jabbed or not, you should be allowed access to health care. That's one thing I'm running on is actually, federal will be free, more funding to health care, including the federal one being still 50% of funding, which will be cut back in after the next budget. I don't believe you should turn away from healthcare from that. Or when you have, people have childbirth and then they can't have a partner with them. That I don't believe in. I believe that healthcare should be available there, and with echo with Brendan there, that if there need to be measures in place, they'd be appropriate there. And jab's only one part of it. The second one I want to say is, back to what these guys said earlier about Royal Commission and integrity. That needs to be brought in, because then we're not going to get answers about who's behind what or how the decision was made. I think if we have something like that, we can find out why the decision is made. I think it'd be a better idea, because we can say, hang on, that decision is not right for us. We can say, that does not make sense, show us the evidence for that. Because I agree that some of the decisions made, I'm a bit confounded myself going, well, hang on, some of it makes sense, but some of it didn't make sense to me. And I go, we need that. So, students are part of it, health I believe is important, and I believe that you deserve the best health care, you deserve the best health care, and so do you guys here. No matter what your status is medically, you all deserve the best health care here to be funded. Secondly, I believe we're going to find out what's going on. Integrity is key there. I think having the federal ICAC, Royal Commissions, get a bottom of what has been handled, and better decisions in future. Hopefully we can hold these politicians to account and say, so does it make sense? We need to know why. Thank you.
I think that the problem is that we have too much government. I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry. Rosemary. I think it's fair to say for Rosemary, I'm glad you're not on the ballot, because I think you'd probably beat all of us anyway. Maybe you should be on the ballot with Julian. I'd like to see you put those questions to Julian, that's for sure. Look, I don't know many of you in this room here, but I do know my friend Percy. Now, Percy has a business, and if Percy wants to make more money, he has to sell better, print better, be better than the other person. Whereas, and I'm sorry to keep going back to it, our good friend Julian, who's never been in business, never had a job outside politics, the way he makes more money is by, staying in politics and making government bigger, right? So all these people in government are motivated to get ahead in their own lives by making it bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, one of my friends, Victor Tay, he's running for one of the seats in Southwest Sydney. He's a pastor, and we've got a policy that says cut taxes. We want to cut taxes, and the reason we want to cut taxes is firstly because you should be able to spend your own money and prioritise your own spending. But he has a more sort of a deeply more philosophical point of view that he wants to starve the beast, and we take the view that the government is a beast, and one way to starve the beast is cutting taxes. I don't think there's any conspiracy theory. I think that we've just grown this great big monster, which is, and everybody within government is motivated to make it bigger and bigger, to take more and more control over you. And again, I don't think it's sinister, it's just because that's the way they get ahead in life, by making the beast bigger and bigger. Look, in our party, we're libertarians. We have one little saying, which is do whatever you like, just don't ask me to pay for it. And I think that when it comes to everything you've talked about, if you want to do it your way, and you want to do it your way, then you should have the choice to do that. If you want to do it some radical way, then you should have to pay for it. And we certainly shouldn't have locked down. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Again, Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party, we're really pushing the Royal Commission for answers, because to be honest with you, none of us know why. None of us have that answer. We want that answer and we deserve to have those answers, but we don't know why. I do know, and I'm sure you all know as well, there's a heck of a lot of money that has been handed around from pharmaceutical companies. So I'm very suspicious about that, and I'd like a lot more information on that. And as members of society, we deserve more information on that. So absolutely, I don't think anyone can give you all the answers, but we sure as hell will push as hard as we can to fight for answers for you. Second to that, by having independence, I mean, any of us really in the lower house, we're not going to be able to change the world. You know, we wish we could. We're fighting for you. We're fighting for what you want. We're here to listen to you. But I tell you what we will do. We will make it much more difficult for these big major parties to pass bills and to change society without you knowing. We cannot do it alone. We need to be voted in. You need everyday working class people sitting there making it harder for these big major parties to pass these bills and to change our community and our society like that. This is where you guys have a say and this is where you guys have the power. We can't do it alone and we're not going to get the seats on our own. We need your vote and we need you guys to stand up. We need to hold these big major parties accountable and we want transparency within our government. Thank you.
You've really hit the bullseye with that question, Rosie. That's a fantastic question. I'm not vaccinated, and neither are my children. And as far as I'm concerned, the so-called policy of continuing to beat the drum about this cult, about a so-called vaccine that's down to 15% effectiveness, we're talking about something that's been geared towards an extinct virus. The alpha strain has been gone now for almost 2 years. And they're still pushing this campaign. Why? I'm not sure that's really a conspiracy, but what I do think it is that the government is so bereft of basically the concept to take responsibility for decisions that they just hand this to people that have no idea how to run an economy, how to run a business, how to run a school, how to run a society, because they don't want to be blamed. That's what's driving this enormous monster forward. We are now in a position where governments basically cannot take responsibility for decisions, and they say, well, there's the expert. The expert told me to do this, so don't blame me. That's a lot of that is what's driving it. Now, as far as the vaccine is concerned, what worries me, as Mark McDonald, the psychiatrist, put it in his book, The United States of Fear, which I really recommend you have a look at, he basically said the locus of this pandemic is not medical. The locus of the pandemic is control. That is what this is about. My wife is Chinese, been married for 12 years, I've lived in China and I've seen the social credit system in its face. I've travelled from across China, I've gone from Xi'an to Pino, a historical city, and I've stopped halfway at Winnipeg. You have no idea what this looks like in the face of a democratic, or what this would do to a democratic system. I've seen a wall the size of that back wall with little people's faces on it. We're saying, and their crimes against the government and against their society, where they've been now disenfranchised. They've had their rights stripped as their score drops below 400. They can't buy a train ticket. Their kids can't go to good schools. They can't have apartments. This is the kind of system that I think a lot of the people in the West would look at with dictator envy. Now, if you do want to talk about a conspiracy, I think the only thing you can point to is that the medical situation now is being used as a vehicle to socially re-engineer our society and to bring a lot of this kind of control into our society, and we're not used to it. I was brought up in a democratic Australia. I was originally born in the Shire, but lived the last 25 years here in Cherrabrook and West Pennant Hills. And I've been lucky enough to travel and see the kind of things that people don't see in this country. When you have democracy and your freedoms literally taken away, and the kind of things that we're doing now as a society are the formative stages. These are the building blocks. They're very happy to do this. You look at Subramanian's Harvard paper that says that the vaccine has made no difference to the spread of COVID. Harvard's paper, 2,600 localities in America, 68 countries. The vaccine has made no difference. So why are we beating the drum about the vaccine? The small number of people who would benefit in terms of risk versus benefit, good. There may be a population that would benefit, but why beat the drum for the rest of us? Why make businesses lose their livelihoods? The corporate medical sector, like the one I work for, their corporate profits are up 25%. That money came from the community. It came from the small businesses and the people who went basically belly up because they had no recourse. I was lucky enough to get a conversation with Mr. Perrottet. Mr. Lisa wouldn't answer my questions, but Mr. Perrottet did, and his office press secretary told me that they were getting 70 phone calls a day from our electorate of people in desperate straits at wit's end. This is what was happening to our people, and they don't care. As a credit to him, he's at least tried to reverse some of the damage that Gladys did to our state. But what's happening now is really, you've got politicians who just simply don't understand the problem, and there's a bureaucracy. You know, there's an old saying, you know, politicians come and go, but bureaucrats are here forever. And these are the guys that are building these structures, you know, under a political guise to push an agenda, which is not just about the disease. The agenda is about control, and so that I really think that is the case of what's been happening for the last 2 years.
Thank you for your question, Rosemary. They say the difference between a conspiracy theory and a conspiracy is about 6 months. Your question, why is this happening? I believe, and I'm going to go out on a limb, and this, you know, for many of you this might be in conspiracy theory land, but there is a deep state with an evil agenda. What do we need to do? We need to drain the swamp, and I believe we need to go further than that, and we need to see Nuremberg 2.0. Every single person that has been complicit, that has aided and abetted this fraud, needs to be held to account, and not just a slap on the wrist. Whatever the measure, whatever the crime, punishment needs to fit it. Does that answer your question then?
All right, so might just take one or two more. We'll try and finish the formal questions about 9. That will give us a little bit of time to do a meet and greet and an informal chat with the candidates. So yes, we have a question here and here, so we'll take the question at the front. This gentleman first. Can you beat Rosemary's question? I don't think.
Beat her in arm wrestle, that's about it. Okay. Name's Dean. Look, it seems like I've just walked into a conspiracist meeting, but to continue with that flavour, I've got a couple of notes, and 6 months before the vaccines were rolled out, Scott Morrison had the pleasure of doing a walk-up interview, which took him all of 30 seconds because he just did not want to be there. And he said in March next year, the vaccines will be rolled out. Some people will be damaged by the vaccines. Some people will die from the vaccines. And there is going to be no compensation because we're all in this together. Now, I've challenged a number of people, no one saw it. The only record of that, Sydney Morning Herald did a story on it, and it just said no compensation for vaccine damage. It's still there. So the point being is, our Prime Minister knew before they were rolled out, people were going to be damaged by these vaccines, and yet the narrative was roll up your arm because they're safe and effective. As Pfizer's rolling out, or not that rolling out, it's been prized out of their claws all the information they knew prior to actually rolling out the vaccines. The vaccine is shown to be, I think it's 12 or 14% effective at best, and after a week it's below 1%. So the question still remains is, this is available, and yet we still have all these mandates that people, if they don't get their 3rd jab of this useless vaccine, which undoubtedly has caused so much damage to certain people, and people I know personally, and from death all the way through to what looks like complete arthritis. So, and even a friend of mine's got neurological problems as well. So this is still being rolled out, and the phrase, trust the science, I've got more trust in God than the science that we have today. It's been bought off, it's been sold, and it's been corrupted. And I know I'm looking at you while I'm saying this because I know your heart's in science, and that's what I've got an engineering mind and science works, but when it's been so corrupted, what do you do to wind this back? What do you do? Do you have to get rid of the entire government and start fresh? Do you have to make the fines so severe that, you know, under the penalty of death, because there's been so many deaths created by this gene therapy, which was being tagged as a vaccine. So what really is it? Because this is not just Australia or in Berowra, this is the world.
So I think the question is, how do we uncorrupt the science? Pretty much.
I seem to be holding the mic, so I'll just go first. How do you uncorrupt the science? Well, who has been complicit in the corruption of the science? It's been the media, it's been the social networks, social platforms, it's been government bodies, it's been the medical industry, and don't for a second think that the medical industry is for the program as it stands. The medical industry is very, very partisan right now, and it just happens to be that the side which is trying to get evidence-based science out the door is the one that's been basically disappeared, you know, in Orwellian terms. The problem that's happened now is that we've had a linking of arms of social media, of basically propaganda vehicles for the sake of pushing forward the so-called positive vaccine initiative. Has anybody heard of that phrase? Yeah. The positive vaccine initiative? That's an agreement, basically, brokered by the English-speaking countries to make sure that nothing is negative is said about the vaccine. That's an agreement, and that's what's been basically behind the fact that you will not hear of any untoward effect, not a single casualty of the vaccine. And as you pointed out, I know many people who could spend the rest of the night just going through our circle of acquaintances, let alone people who have compiled the information properly. But the problem is right now is that the only way to fix this is to bring back proper evidence-based discussion, and that's what's basically has gone out the window right now. All we hear is propaganda. This is not science, this is propaganda. And what is propaganda? Propaganda is the willful telling of lies by those in authority for political reasons. That's propaganda. And that's what's basically happening to us right now, is that we have to fix this problem, we have to look at the social media networks, the platforms, the way they've been censoring, for example, Craig Kelly. He's been working with people like Brian Tyson, who's had 6,000 COVID patients with early treatment. All of them were saved. 0 were lost. So why was early treatment suppressed? For the simple reason is they want you to believe the propaganda. Why was Clive Palmer bought 40 million doses of hydroxychloroquine and gave it to the government, and they burned it? And last month, all of a sudden, the Queensland Health Officer says, "We know what, hydroxychloroquine works. We better get it back on the schedule." You know, this is madness. This is not evidence-based science. And the social media and the media, the ABC, they need to be looking at. They're up to reporting historical deaths now. If you listen to the radio lately, they're now reporting historical deaths to keep the numbers up. In other words, historical deaths are those that died back in February. They're now reporting them as daily numbers. Why? Because this is not evidence-based science. This is propaganda. And we have to deal with those who've been party to the propaganda to get the science right and get it back to evidence-based.
I mean, at the end of the day, we had doctors that went against the agenda, deregistered. Now, you can go to several different doctors. If you have a condition or an illness or an ailment, whatever it may be, you can go to several different doctors and you might get a varying opinion. Has that ever happened to you? It sure happened to me. It may not be totally different, but you'll get a varying opinion. You went to the doctors to get a varying opinion on this, and that doctor got silenced. That doctor got shut down. So we need to make sure this government is held accountable. That's what it keeps coming back to. We need to make sure we have people in government that is going say we do not pass that bill. We are not okay with that. We are not okay with mandating vaccines. We are not okay with keeping information from the public. It's the same thing that we keep going back to. That is what we need to fight for, and that is what you need everyday people in government to ask those questions and to really push for. How do we fix it? Look, I mean, like I said, we honestly can't change the world, but what we can do is we can get in there and we can push the hard questions and we can get transparency. Because at the moment, all there is there's a lot of money that's being handed around, a lot of pharmaceutical companies, and a lot of our top government representatives that have made a lot of money, and a lot of people are very, very sick. I know also people that have gone from passing away due to heart attack, blood clots, myocarditis, to young girls that I competed and rode horses with that were absolutely debilitated in bed with extreme versions of arthritis riddled through their bodies also, all of them healthy. So this is really something the government needs to answer for, and something that we need to challenge them on, one by one representative at a time. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so the science is what it is. It's science, right? And it's the abuse of that science which becomes a lie and becomes bad policy. But if you want to ask where this conspiracy, I suppose, can come from, just follow the money. And I think if you want to get that cleaned up, you want to make sure that this doesn't happen, then what you need to do, you need a national ICAC, you need to make sure that politicians answer something under oath, they don't take corporate donations, and they certainly shouldn't be able to serve on any board at least for 5 years after they resign from politics. Just have a look at how many politicians have passed some wonderful legislation which is really bad for you, and then suddenly they exit politics and they're safe working for that same company, right? So follow the money, find out who bought shares in various vaccines and things like that, find out who's pushing it. Now, as I said, I'm not against vaccines. I think vaccines are actually wonderful. There are certain people who can't have certain vaccines. That's part of the research that goes on when vaccines are developed, right? You would have heard the conspiracy about the Pfizer vaccine, where they got the 2,000 pages of things. That's not true. They had tested vaccines very thoroughly for a whole bunch of things, but unfortunately that evidence has been muddied, and now it says that all these side effects actually happen. No. Some of those side effects do happen to people, but they have to test for all those just to make sure they don't. So these vaccines are tested very thoroughly. But of course, everybody's different. Some people will get a side effect from a vaccine, and some people won't. There are some people that have certainly not been able to have the Pfizer vaccine because they've got conditions that means they can't have it. And I think at the end of the day, for you guys to trust and to take the vaccines, because we all know that vaccines like measles vaccines and that are very, very important, right? That we have to have trust. We have to have trust that all that evidence is out there. We also have to trust that if the government mandates a vaccine for you, they certainly should be able to compensate you if you have a negative effect against that. So that, thank you.
No mandates. Some mandates are okay. How do you compensate death? Well, okay, sorry.
So mandates are very, very important in only very certain circumstances. So in other words, as you'd imagine, if you're going to be working with a bunch of immune-compromised people, you want to make sure that you're not sick. So we do actually already have mandatory vaccinations. They're called measles, right? Measles vaccinations and that. We give that to all children. Why? Because measles is incredibly contagious. So in other words, we make sure that those people, if they're going to be working for people who have immune-compromised systems, should be mandated. But obviously, if the person's not working in that facility, they shouldn't have that mandate because they're no danger. So it depends. I think the thing that you guys are concerned by is the fact that the government has made a blanket decision that everyone has to be vaccinated and everyone has to follow the same rules. Well, it needs to be more nuanced than that. It needs to make sure that the appropriate things, when the government puts a mandate on, it has to only be in circumstances which warrant that. And if they are going to warrant that, it needs to be disclosed publicly and it needs to be questioned right? Because if you can't question politics, if it's no longer a politics or democracy, it's a dictatorship. So I think it is very important, but we need to find out the nuances, make sure it's appropriate when those conditions are actually ever enforced, and if they are enforced, everyone should be able to question that to find out if it's appropriate. It needs to be done transparently. Thank you.
Yes. I agree with what you're saying, but the ability to question, and this has been, I suppose, a great format, is this whole vaccine debacle is a perfect example of when you can open up a packet of vaccines and it's got the safety data sheet which is totally blank. So just the idea of having informed consent was not available to anyone, and that's including the doctor. So at the end of the day, we've got a unique situation when I don't think we've ever come across before, which should never ever happen again. And so I come back to the same question: how do you undo all this? You know, follow the money, all of it. You know,
too late.
Yeah. So you know, I don't even know where to go. I keep looking for what is the first domino. You know, is it the globalists? You know, as such, is it the One New World Order? Is it the World Economic Forum? Is it, you know, Klaus? Should we just go and lock him away and it'll disappear tomorrow? Yes. I don't know. And Gates.
Very good stuff. Sorry, just to answer back to your question there. The long shot is, I don't know the best way to approach that, because social media, I reckon, become publishers now. They haven't become just for content. They publish their own ways, where the fact checking says not always. Well, actually said fact checking on Facebook is their own opinion. Look, it's actually an interesting point that was raised to me by a resident today at the polling booth. And they said to me, there's no law to regulate advertising political. No law. We can advertise what we want politically, and it says whatever it is may be. So I believe what Rihanna's saying is we get one of us in, we'll push it through transparency, but also look at if there are laws that can kind of make sure that, yes, there is a way of getting some truth out there. Hopefully, there is truth, not something that's manufactured. I don't know how we can best do that, whether it be looking at tightening laws on media, like media ownership, where it be one person owns so much. Whether it be looking at social media as publishers now, they should have regulations on certain, like other media. What you're publishing, they should have a separate platform for that. I think social media has kind of merged the two together. I think that's what's happening, which is becoming news and facts becoming blurred. And opinion and fact is being really blurred now. I think that's one thing to look at in the laws. Whether about this whole trolling law currently being talked about the government, I'm not sure about that one, because there could be times where they can use it against political opponents. So, because I don't know if you guys are aware of that with a new trolling law coming through for a lot of people. So that's one coming through, yeah. So I'll look into that. If it's a way to help improve getting information out there, then I'm all for that. Whether it be also make sure Freedom of Information Act is changed to allow actually you guys to put information out as well, that you guys deserve to know, not have things redacted all the time. So, long and short it is, I don't know the answers, happy to look into it. There are some suggestions there that I reckon I could maybe start that process of trying to get something out there for us to know and actually find more information without being diluted.
The first thing I'd like to say is that, you know, our policy one on our Freedom Manifesto here, which I'm here to plug, is about COVID. We've got 9 other policies that address cost of living, education, debt and deficit, and all the other things that we're concerned about. So I encourage you to grab one of those. But what I will say very quickly, you know, as I say, we're libertarians at the Liberal Democrats. We believe in, you know, small government, etc., but we also believe in personal responsibility. So I'd like to say that everyone in this room, if you want to make a change, I'm going to put the personal responsibility back on you. And I'm going to say there's 3 things you're going to do. I'm going to tell you what the easy thing to do. The easy thing to do is to vote for one of us. That's the easy thing, and you get no points for that. I'm not giving you any credit for doing what's obvious, which is going to vote for us. That's the first thing. The second thing you have to do, it's not enough, because I don't know, there's 60 people in here, and that ain't enough. We need more. So we need you to proselytise for us. We need you to go out into your community and to tell everyone to get rid of the major parties. They've sold you out, we've got to kick them out. So the responsibility is on you to do that, and you can do that by talking to the people that you meet, because 1 vote's not enough for every one of you. We need 5 votes or 10 votes if we're going to get anywhere. The other thing that you can do is we're all on social media. You know, get onto our social medias, follow us, and share the hell out of us so that we can help get that message out there. So yes, there's something you can do about it.
Is it working? It's working. 2 questions, and then we're done for the night.
Oh, my name's Peter. So COVID's been talked about a lot. I have all my views on the vaccines and everything. But the one thing that hasn't been talked about is the education. Now I've got 2 kids. One of them will be starting school, whilst you guys will hopefully be in government. What are your views on the whole gender discussion through school, pushing this, what is it? Was that someone that said, what is it? Yeah, they're pushing transgender on kids, right? So prepubescent kids are being told that you can be any gender under the sun, right? And they're being put on puberty blockers, which basically are sterilising them, right? And they're brainwashing these kids to believe the climate agenda, your COVID bullshit. They're sexualising our children, and I'm fully against it. And I want to know what your views are, because I'm going to be voting for you. So, yeah.
Thank you, Peter. I think most of you would realise from my last response that I've gone off script, and I'm not a politician, and I don't want to give you a politician's answer. I don't know if I'm going to be endorsed by my party anymore, actually, for going out on a limb. But Peter, I totally agree. I think if I was to give you the sanitised response, I'm not interested in giving you a sanitised response. I think the education system needs to be overhauled. I think the whole curriculum, not too radical, right? But I think we need to get back to teaching the basics. We need to get rid of all this radical ideology that's all pervasive. I homeschool, or my wife homeschools my 5 children, and we have had to make. There's all sorts of consequences that we've had to face as a result of homeschooling, the decisions we make. But no, I'm totally against the radical ideology that's being pushed through. It comes through as a Trojan horse. We're told it's safe schools, anti-bullying. The narrative is one thing, there's always an agenda. And so I'm always looking out for what the agenda is. And we heard it with the vaccines. They're safe, they're free, they're effective. That was the narrative. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if I'm going to be endorsed by my party anymore. But again, I just want to speak truth, call out lies where I see them. I think I've said enough.
Well done for having the courage to work with the truth.
Thank you.
One of the things about engineering is that when you create good software and good ideas, you always write the software ideas to cover the 99.999% of cases. You never write software to cover the 0.0001 exceptions. Because when you do that, you write very bad software and you create very bad policy. My feeling is that, to answer your question quite specifically, I'm putting aside the fact that I'm a Christian and I hold Christian values at the same time. That's my personal belief. But my feeling is that the transgender argument does not belong in government regulation or policy. It should not be there. And it's not a question. The thing you need to really understand is that one of the things that has been happening over the last, since I was a kid, time has been marching on. I'm 63 now. So time has been marching on. One of the things that's happened is that the government departments have been creating artificial structures to break up the family. They create departments for children. They create, complaints departments where children can go and complain against their parents. They go there and they create substitutes for the family members. If there is an exception of some kind, it should be dealt with within the family and within the medical circles in that very, very, very tiny number of absolutely different exceptions. It should not be part of public policy. It doesn't belong there. Neither should the discussion be taken up by so-called public debate and authorities. These are things that really, one of the things we really have to do is to make sure that that the family unit is the most important thing in our society. That's what drives us. That's what separates us from animals. Is the way we interact with our children and our families, and we must never let governments interfere in that, ever. That's my feeling.
So my partner and I, we've recently been discussing where are we going to send our son to school. It's a genuine concern. We shouldn't even be this worried about it. Now the issue is curriculum. We were at a function over the weekend and Mark Latham gave a speech and it was very interesting. He had the ability to go around and visit some schools. Now as parents you don't get that ability. You send your kid off to school in good faith and trust that they're going to be educated by a teacher. Mark Latham had the opportunity, he went round, he visited some schools in our local electorate and in Western Sydney. Now throughout those schools he noticed there was a significant difference between public and private. Now yes, there's always going to be a little bit of a difference, as that's why you have public and that's why you have private. However, the quality of teaching should remain the same or very close to. Now there's a very big issue and a genuine concern, my concern which I share with you, is teachers are wandering around in some classrooms having coffee, letting kids self-learn. I don't know any kids that are self-learning very well and how effective that is. I mean, I don't know if there is even data in that, but I sure as buggery do not want my kids self-learning. And now we have sons, and I do not want my kid going to school and being told that he could be a girl. Now young kids, they just don't have the ability or the capacity to make these decisions or to undo or to comprehend these kind of statements. So it should not be said, I have no problem if you're an adult and you decide to be straight, gay, bi, lesbian, transgender, that's your own opinion, I respect that. It's not my decision what you should do in your adult life. But be buggered if I'm going to let anyone confuse or tell my son that he can be anything but a boy. Yeah.
Well, just to be a little bit controversial, I'd love to know what Julie and Lisa thinks of Catherine Deeves. What does he think about Catherine Deeves? I'd like to know. Because we know what Matt Keane thinks, he's bestie. But look, thank you for your question. I don't know if one of my lawyers here put you up to it, because Policy 8 in our Freedom Manifesto is decentralised education. So we have some very specific solutions for education. We do believe that, we don't believe in NAPLAN because we think teachers teach NAPLAN, we think it's a waste of time. We think that schools should be able to opt out of the national curriculum. So if you think that there's some learning stuff going on in the curriculum, you should be able to opt out of it. We believe in homeschooling co-ops because at the moment it's difficult. I don't know really much about homeschooling, but to form a co-op, you've got all these regulations and ridiculous laws and restrictions and all the rest of it. We need to cut that back because the little I do know about homeschooling, it'd be a lot easier if you could do it sort of on a collective basis and share some of the responsibilities. And the other policy that is my favourite policy is a school voucher system. So we believe that rather than fund the institutions, fund the schools, and this applies all across the board, each kid should get a voucher. The parents get the voucher, and if you want to spend it at this school or that school or that school, and let the schools compete. Let them compete on the basis of how good they are, but let them also compete on what sort of nonsense they want to shove down your throat. That's our solution.
Thanks, Peter, for your question, because it hits home to me because I work in school care, so I have over 17 years. And one thing that gets me is when a topic comes like that to the kids, they say to me, the topic what it may be, and I say, I know they go, all right, that's a topic you have to talk to your parents. I believe that there is some responsibility, in some regards where Nick here has to be back to the parents in that regards. But at the same time I agree that we're not going to force stuff on them as well. I don't believe talking about the sexualised nation below teenage years. Absolutely not. For me, we have a thing called Mind to Mind Place. And looking at kids on encouraging play, helping learn through play. That's what they're there for. Their brains are still developing and they're still learning the social skills. It's there for now. They still have innocence. Now, I've had some very curly questions asked by kids in the past. I remember one time, I was out in Hornsby 2 years ago. One kid had a parent walk in, as it's happened. One kid goes to me, so what's masturbation? And the parent goes, good luck with that one. To this day, I kid you not, to this day, I don't remember how much to get off that topic so quick. It was used to skip, by the way. So quick off that topic. But I would say to the parent, look, we keep mentioning this today. You need to have to talk about that. That's how you do that, it's your call. So long and short it is, I think it's two parts. One, I believe there should be better funding for schools, but also I believe that there should be, like recently in Florida, stopping the sexualised nature happening there. That's a time when their brains developed and had more understanding. Second thing is, I believe there also should be some responsibility back to parents. But part of that is helping the parents understand what those topics are and how to navigate that. If it means there are resources or counselling, whatever may be available, fair enough. But that should be the parent's choice to help raise the kid, not mine, and not someone else from the school saying that. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, so my daughter's a little bit older than that, so we didn't experience that in school. But I suppose one of the things we want to do is remove the cuts that the Liberals passed, $500 million cuts to public schools. We'd like to reverse that. As opposed to the transgender issue, I really don't know much about the issue when you're teaching to kids. I don't think it's appropriate for primary school students because I don't think they've got the understanding and I don't think it's really any of their business. In high school, I'm not sure. It really depends on the maturity level and depends on how that's taught. I do believe there was some misunderstanding about some of the anti-bullying can't think of the word now. There was anti-bullying subjects being taught in school, and they were misrepresented as being this transgender indoctrination. So I think we need to get the difference between, I suppose, the actual crux of the question that you're asking about is, are they actually indoctrinating our kids with this? And separating that from the anti-bullying subjects that were being taught as part of the safe schools. I think that's really a subject that I don't really know too much about, but I think it's very, very important that parents are educated to find out what these subjects are to make sure if that's something appropriate for their children to learn. At the moment, I don't know. My kids didn't go to the school at that time when I'm teaching this, so I don't know much about it. But I think if parents aren't being told these subjects that are making people feel uncomfortable and exactly what sort of stuff's being taught, so that parents can also have a chance to talk to their children if that's what the education system's going to teach. I think parents need to be involved to find out what you're going to taught. Thank you.
All right, so we've got the last question of the evening, and then there's plenty of time after this to mingle and talk to the candidates and ask them any more questions that you might have. But I think it's appropriate that the last question goes to our wonderful cameraman for the night.
Thank you. I'm not going to ask you to stand up, just stay sitting and answer this, but politically, who are each of you going to preference?
I'm going to take this one, Zed. It's good to see you, by the way. Nice to be there. There's a bit of balance around preferencing. You actually choose who you vote for. Now, we can give you out how to vote cards, everyone does this, but it's just a recommendation. You can go say stuff, you put in the recycle bin, you choose. I can't tell you how you vote, or how you vote, or how you vote. Simple as that. So, when you have a vote card, it's a recommendation. So, for example, these people here might say recommend a different party because of its similar beliefs. And that's good. You can kind of actually see where other parties lie. But all it is really is you choose a vote. So when I say my how to vote card says vote one independent, let's say you number boxes in Berowra from 2 to 10, however you want, because it's your vote. I'm not going to tell you that. You decide. You're going to vote 2 for LDP or for AFP, UAP, FON, Fusion, whoever it may be, Libs, Greens, Labor. That's not my decision. That is yours. So you understand the difference between preferences. There's only one place in Australia that does preference deals that still matters, and that's Victoria in the Upper House. Western Australia abolished that last year after the Daylight Saving Party had a candidate get in on 98 votes in a region, it's the Outback, that voted against Daylight Saving. So that's why it's abolished. The Senate abolished this over 6 years ago. So when you vote, you choose. Just remember though, when you do above the line in the Senate, 6 is the minimum, below the line, minimum is 12. If you vote for one of us candidates in the green ballot, you must number all boxes, but you choose.
Actually, sorry, it is, that's how it works, right? So just what I said, there was a condition in the Senate in 2013 where political parties used to give their votes to people they preference. So you'd vote for a political party, put number 1, and they would distribute the votes. But that was changed in 2016, only in the Senate. For the lower house, which is this green one, you have to tick all boxes. You have to number all boxes, and that's always in the order that you choose. So there is, when everyone's talking about the preferencing deal, just as Benjamin said, sorry, I keep getting them confused, the how to vote cards, we list who we think that we like. So now, if you vote for the Fusion Party, where I would give my preferences on my how to vote card, would obviously be parties that I think represent my party's value closely. Of course, you can still vote for me and then vote for someone else completely different, or you can follow whatever you want. But those are purely the voter's choice, right? And use the how to vote on how you think that the politician you're voting for is going to think that those parties most represent them. That's it.
Do you have a how to vote card?
I do. Yes.
So what are your preferences on
Oh, okay, so I'm voting green. I preference Greens number 2, Labor number 3, and Benjamin number 4. I can't remember the rest. Yeah. But I'll have I haven't got them printed out, but I've got them on my website, so you can see that.
I mean, what really matters is where you put the major parties, is the gist of your question. I mean, let's be obvious about that. You know, I mean, I've preferenced all of the people on my left here. Again, I mean, on our how to vote, it actually has printed on it, you know, just put us first, or whatever else you do is up to you. However, if you're asking us, then, you know, and you are asking us because, if you are asking us, it's because you want to see how we get the best result. And we're saying, well, look, the best way of getting a result, since you're asking, is the way that we've preferenced. Now, I do think it's absolutely absurd. I mean, I'm not in the UAP clearly, but you know, the way they've been picking on Clive Palmer is hilarious. I mean, what do you want him to do? Put the Greens second? I mean, just because they didn't, just because Clive hasn't put the party that the journalists want in as second preference, you know, they want some big scandal that he's put the Liberals in. But look, out of the major parties, yes. I mean, I know there's, you know, I have put Julian ahead of all the other major parties, but he comes after all of these guys. Unfortunately, the way the system works, you know, it is a preferential system, and so you've got a preference.
The main point is that if you guys don't put a number in every box for the House of Representatives on that green card, your vote will not be counted. So please make sure whatever order you put all of us candidates in, that you number every single box. Look, on my how to vote card, I've listed the preferences that I would like to see. If you vote me as 1 and I get knocked out, it just goes to your number 2. Okay, so if you're voting for me, on my card, your vote will just go to number 2. It doesn't matter who I want the vote to go to, but as per my how to vote card, I've listed my preferences, which goes to Liberal Democrat, UAP, and then Australian Federation Party. So they were my top ones, and that would be my recommendation. However, you can use any order that suits you, and like I said, yeah, if you vote me 1 and I get knocked out, it'll just go to your second vote. Your vote for me won't go to anybody else.
The statistic given to me was that about half of the people use how to votes. Now, I would assume that's true because that seems like a reasonable statistic because people generally do have some understanding of who they're voting for. Now, having said that, I'd like you to consider something. Now, the United Australia Party, basically, we have put generally Labor, Liberal, Greens last, and that's how it is in my ticket. Now, the thing you need to understand is there were a small number of Liberals who sided with us and crossed the floor to vote against lockdowns and mandates. People like Antic, you know, at the time, you know, Christensen, basically also Rennick. These are people that we felt as a party that we should not punish because they voted with us on the anti-mandate, anti-lockdown legislation, which was defeated, by the way, thanks to Mr. Lisa. Now, the thing that I would also like to point out to you that there are only really 3 controversial seats which in in our preferencing which caused the controversy. The rest of them are really by the book. Now, the thing I really want you to understand is if you think that you can vote one of us first and Mr. Lisa second, you kill us. That will kill us. You need to understand that when you want to, if you want change, the kind of change that we can bring as freedom parties, you need to support us completely. And that means do not preference Mr. Lisa, the Greens or Labor. So if you do want to go vote off the ticket, you know, the ticket was thought about, and in many cases it's the best chance that one of us will have some success. So really what you need to understand is that if you've got some residual loyalty to Mr. Lisa, you know, you will do us in by placing him second.
I echo those comments. I don't have a how to vote card. Again, you know, my only recommendation is that you put the majors last, and you know the three to my right, you know, in the top four. You know, I think Rihanna and Nick have me at number 4, and that's not because they don't like me, it's because I was late to the race. Yeah. And so there's nothing personal there, and I understand that. But again, you know, absolutely echo what Chris has said about, you know, if you want to see real change, you know, you have to put the majors last. I am contemplating putting one out, but again, I don't want to be prescriptive. You know, that's your vote, and I don't want to tell you how to vote. But you know, if I read the room right, and I know you want change, as long as we put the majors last, I think that's the important thing.
Can I just mention that there's a very interesting link, and it's a guy who does all this explanation using containers and masks. And that I found very helpful to understand how the whole system
Well, we have actually got over time, the 9 o'clock, so we might have to just check with the club how much time we've got to hang around.
Till 10 o'clock.
We have till 10. So this is where, you know, we thought if you just want to get up and mingle around, the candidates, you know, have some of their information at the tables, and you can do a bit of an eyeball to eyeball ask a question. It worked quite well for us last week at the event. So maybe we've got about half an hour doing that. But just first of all, thank you, Neil. Thank you, candidates. Thank you for all the questions. And if you like what we've done as volunteers, we're out there, we're at the pre-polling booths. We'll be out there on election day. We're rounding up more people to help us to be scrutineers, so we'd love to hear from you. I might even open up my laptop down there if you're very excited. You can come and I'll register you in the spreadsheet as a volunteer. And I have put a donation jar there if any of you feel you can put some money in, because we're all volunteers. You know, everybody's dipping in their own pockets. We volunteers are also paying for expenses out of our own pockets. So any donations just help towards compensating those. And we've got Sandy here, who's one of our volunteers. And I had a few apologies from some of the other volunteers. Some of us have got young children, not me. But we're out there every day and we're fighting the good fight. And we are encouraging vote majors last as well, because we want to